All right. All right, this is my first live on this channel. We've been going live on the other channel for quite a bit, but I had to learn the hard way. The YouTube algorithm doesn't like that. They don't like when you go live and you upload clips on the same channel. So we're gonna make a change here. Gonna live stream on this channel. Hopefully it gains some traction, but if it doesn't, that's all right. And then we'll upload clips from the live streams onto my main channel. With that being said, man, it's been a crazy, crazy day. I'm very, very happy with what's going on in the world right now. Not that everything's perfect, but nonetheless, it's better than it was in the past. The past 30 days has been wild, from like crazy lows to amazing highs. Now, with that being said, man, let's catch up to what's going on. There's been a lot of different reactions to the market. And it's so weird seeing people kind of hate on what's going on. Like, why would you want, different results? But nonetheless, I think what I want to do is look at results from different networks. That's the best way to do this. You're gonna get weird reactions from different news networks. But nonetheless, let's check this out.
Thanks to President Trump's latest trade truce with China, and the world's two largest economic superpowers have agreed to slash tariffs by 115%. That means there's still some in there, but they're much lower, and it's for a 90-day period. So Wall Street, the corner of Wall and Broad, liking the cooling off that they see. The deal cuts reciprocal tariffs, again, by 115%. And China will reduce pressure on U.S. products from 125% down to 10%. The U.S. will temporarily lower tariffs on Chinese goods from 145 to 30%. So you see, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent revealed that this breakthrough was able to happen under President Trump because China walked all over Biden.
In January 2020, President Trump produced a template. We had an excellent trade agreement with China, and the Biden administration chose not to enforce it. The Chinese delegation basically told us that once President Biden came into office, they just ignored their obligations.
And now that President Trump was able to make major progress with China, he's eyeing an agreement with the European Union next. But warns those talks will be tougher.
In all parts of the European Union, they were the toughest of all. They were nasty. And I see that. I see that with trade, too. European Union is in many ways nastier than China. We've just started with them. Oh, they'll come down a lot. You watch. We have all the cards. They treated us very unfairly.
All the cards, David.
Yeah. I watched the European Union debate. It was a few days ago on the tariffs. And you could see the setup already. And President Trump is right. There are so many moving parts in Europe, and it's either full-on anti-Trump or they can't preserve their socialism. The other thing they face in Europe is that Germany is breaking away a little bit from this. You see the shifts in Germany, and they're sick of being basically the economic lapdog for the other countries. So they're not as aligned as they'd like to be, but there are a lot of people that are just living in that TDS world. And I saw that in the debates. I watched a couple of hours of it and realized that this is what we're up against. But China proves one thing, that when you stop playing games with them and pay attention to their weakness, China is not as strong as they'd like to be. They're our biggest trade deficit. But the fact is that they're weak because if their goods sit there and they're an export economy,
right,
they're not selling to maintain their communism.
So, Kennedy, can you talk to us about really what this means in a broader sense with the European Union? They don't have a singular dollar over there. You've still got the British. You have a lot of people on the continent who do things differently financially.
Yes.
How much does all that matter?
Well, it does matter because the European Union came into existence to compete with America on the global stage, hoping to be, you know, the third leg in a hegemonic triad. And that has not necessarily been the case because there have, for the last couple decades, been several countries in the EU that have really dragged their economy down, and they've tried to restructure their debt over the years. And I don't blame Germany. I mean, Bavaria wants to secede from Germany because they're prosperous, and you have other parts of the country that, you know, the social safety net is acting like an anvil. So they're doing whatever they can, but I'm sorry, like the free market and appealing to consumers is the best way to go instead of creating a system of dependency that is unsustainable in any country in any language.
Emily.
Yeah, you know, I looked at not through the lens of an economist by any means, but just as an American, as I've been told that under the prior administration, our obligations were ignored. And I can't skip over that because the idea and the concept of an abdication of duty is something that somehow the left pushed a narrative for us that it was somehow tolerable. And they reframe President Trump's actions as somehow that of a self-serving dictator. When the opposite is true, he is finally, for once, fighting for the American people and America as an actual global superpower, or simply as just mighty and independent, rather than being totally trod upon by all of these countries like China, where the capitulations and policies of the prior administration and Democrats like it are what got us into that cheap, fast, casual, tariffs imbalance, high debt mess in the first place. So bravo. And just remember that the narrative will never let this be a joy or a success. They will continue painting this in poor light. And that, lo and behold, they said China would never come around, right? It was going to be World War III. Well, look what happened.
It's
well,
so
it's
weird,
like Haley
man.
always says, deliverables. I mean, Trump is coming forth with them. That's got to really hurt the left. I want to stick with the European Union for just a second, though, because a lot of things are really, really pricey over there. And Kennedy mentioned that there are 2 or 3 economies within the union that are not viable, and they're having to shore each other up and all of that. That makes them weak against someone on the global stage like Trump, who wants to now, as a president, do a deal with tariffs.
For sure. And of course, they don't have the United Kingdom there anymore either. I'm still sitting here so impressed that you watched a few hours of a European Union debate on tariffs. Whoa, David Webb.
I'm that guy.
You are that guy.
You're the one.
Let me just say, you know, it's a huge win. And Scott Bessent has kind of been teasing this all along, saying when you're the surplus country, I mean, China's running a trade surplus. They have more to lose than us as the trade deficit country, and that appears to be right. This is a major breakthrough. 3 a.m. Eastern time is when Scott Bessent was announcing this on the world stage. He also talked about this helps to bring on critical supplies, and I couldn't help but think of my time in the White House in 2020 when, you know, Obama left the cupboards bare, as Trump kept saying, with N95 respirators and all the COVID supplies we needed. They've put an eye towards shoring that supply line up, and Scott Bessent should be praised. You know, President Trump said, maybe we bring these tariffs to 80%, but I leave it up to Scott B. Well done, Scott B. This is a big breakthrough with President Trump at the top.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-host, Harry.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys caught it, but the other day on Truth Social, Trump had posted, my next truth will be one of the most important and impactful I've ever issued. He started talking about, we got to look at that too, started talking about what he's doing with pharmaceuticals. But he had also in this press conference, he talked about how you better invest because it's going to be crazy. And he's pretty much lobbing a alley-oop for Americans to lock in, but people will say that was for the billionaires. Check this out. So Tom Lee is a well-known investor, and he's always, you know, giving his opinion. Sometimes he's right, sometimes he's wrong, but most of the time he's pro American stock market. So you can kind of take what he's giving from, you know, a honest perspective, even when he is wrong. He doesn't seem to have any bias, but nonetheless, man, check this out. He gives good feedback on what he sees moving forward, and it's kind of spot on with what I've been saying the past week or so. So check it out.
The news. Now let's hit your money, because let's be blunt. When the tariffs were first announced on April 2nd, markets got crushed. Headlines were all over the place, and not just in the business media. General news leading with stories about stocks falling. I even heard a show talk about retirees, quote, being wiped out. But Fundstrat's Tom Lee did not take the bait. He advised clients to hold fast. Said that markets would have to make new highs or would make new highs this year. And guess what? We are there in one of the fastest stock recoveries in history. We are not quite positive on the year yet. Maybe this is the high. Maybe it won't happen. But this has still been an amazing bounce back. Joining us now is Fundstrat Global Advisors Head of Research, Tom Lee, also a CNBC contributor. I think you're in like a studio, so you can't run like an actual victory lap. And maybe you're not there to do it yet. But Tom, what did you see that apparently so many others miss? Because I thought we were going to zero.
Well, and zero is always a possibility, Brian, but I think it comes down to three things. You know, the first is the high yield market never confirmed the panic that we were seeing from the economists about the economy. High yield spreads did widen to like 439 basis points wide. But if we were barreling into a recession, they'd get to 700 or so, and they're back down to like 360. The second is that the stock market did have a liquidation event, as you point out, but waterfall declines, all of them, 17 out of 18 since 1950, had a V-shaped recovery. So we knew that whenever the bottom was established, the bottom would be a V-shape. 2022 was the only real exception because of Jackson Hole. And the third is we had a lot of faith in businesses. You know, these companies have been battle tested. They survived a pandemic shutdown. They survived a bullwhip effect from a recovery. They survived the fastest rate hikes in history. So I think that businesses really should get credit, and they've delivered earnings even for Q1 and for guidance that have been way better given the Armageddon that we expected. So I think those three things are the reasons we sort of told our clients to kind of buckle down and even add exposure.
You know, I did something I almost never do, Kelly, which is I deleted a tweet. Because I tweeted out around that time, I was like, you're not really losing money
thinking about that tweet.
until you sell. And
You
I meant it.
left it up.
No, I should have. But I meant it, Tom, as a reference to this show that I was listening to on another network where they said retirees are being wiped out. And I was frustrated. I tweeted out, people got a hold of it, and it took this life itself. But my point was that unless you're retiring in a few months or a year, whatever, or you're 80 years old, whatever it might be, you don't. It's better to be in the market for a long time than to try to time the market, correct? Like if you're a trader, hedge fund, that's one thing. But if you're a longer-term investor with a timeline of more than 5 years, the bias is clearly to the upside. But I think because the sell-off was so politically oriented that it kind of took on a life of its own. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of factors at work. We were highlighting it during the tariff dislocation, but we know that the equity professional universe of investors, you know, looking at political surveys, more than 60% are Democratic leaning. So their interpretation of the actions of the White House was half empty. So we saw an exaggerated move in equities relative to the bond market, where in the bond market it actually is flipped. In the fixed income world, 60% of bond managers are registered Republicans. And so that's why I think you get better signal, at least in this instance, from what the bond market was doing. And the second is, of course, something people have talked about is the 10 best days. You know, we were highlighting
There's
this
only 4 on this
multiple times that if you exclude the 10 best days of 2023
I'll see you guys over
or the
there.
10 best days of 2024, the S&P only returned 3% a year each of those years. So you need to stay in the market, as you point out, in order to get the 20% gains. And I think this year is another example of people rage sold at 48.35, and now they're buying in today. They missed 1,000 points or 20 percentage points of a gain in 2025.
And I don't know how much I stressed to you guys this the past 4 weeks. Like, this was the time to start buying. When I saw the market dip as much as it did, the S&P 500, the QQQ, it was crazy. I just don't understand, you know, so many people sold. And part of it was because CNN was oh man, so doom and gloom. I mean, this is what happened. It was, you had companies who had great earnings, right? They did nothing wrong. And then Trump he's tweeting, we get the trade war going, and you have companies that aren't even affected by China. They don't even sell to China, or they're a tech company and they make no money from China, and they went crashing down. I'm like, bro, dollar cost average. And as a matter of fact, every time you see a crazy dip like this, let's say it drops, boom, another crazy dip, I was doubling up on my dollar cost averages. And now this is what we got. A huge surge beyond where we were where we were when all of this trade war started. We're about to surpass that. And you guys missed out on all of these gains, all of those gains. And I couldn't stress to you guys enough, man, like when people are scared, we showed this right here. I showed you guys the fear index. This fear index was all the way down here, guys. It was like a 4. And this is where everybody was sung. And I'm like, yo, guys, this is why I tell everybody, focus on your main gig. Whatever your job is, if you're self-employed, if you're a business owner, if you have a W-2 job, focus on making as much money as you can from that and living below your means, because when shit hits the fan and everybody's scared, you'll have the cash flow to start putting money in here. And make sure, that you have different sources of income. And when shit hits the fan and the market drops the way it did, the market drops like this, that's when it's time to take on overtime, go do Uber Eats, whatever you need to do to make more cash so you can put more money into the market. And now look at where it's at. I'm not saying it's not a time to buy now. I'm not saying you can't make money now. Of course not. But I'm just saying, like, the longer you stay in the market, the more you're gonna recognize patterns. And I've sold a lot of my positions right now, but I'm gonna be watching for more opportunities. What I see going forward is what I think Tom Lee is gonna talk about right now. Let's check it out.
25.
Do you have any thoughts on kind of bond yields at these levels? Does it matter? I mean, just kind of picking up on what we were just discussing. And for those who missed and wish that they had piled in at the lows now a month ago, what do you say now? That no one now wants to go, all right, fine, I'm going to make my move now, and now stocks are back at the highs. Maybe we then slide lower again. So just some kind of general advice.
Yeah, I've got a couple pieces of advice. I mean, right now, the 10-year yield at 4%, I think isn't a huge burden for not only for the government, but also for the economy or for companies. So I think it's a level of funding that businesses can earn a return on capital. And then as we think about 2026, there's a lot to be excited about. We have deregulation coming. We have the tariff debacle behind us. We have tax cuts possibly. And then we might have better trade partnerships with other countries, meaning U.S. companies have earnings upside. I think that the market is flat year to date through May. So I don't think anyone should feel like they missed anything. I think that they're going to have a chance to buy a lot of companies. A lot of stocks got obliterated. And I think that these washed out names are still opportunities. And we talk about it with our clients, whether it's Tesla or the Mag 7 or the small caps, there's many opportunities still.
Very cool. So like,
his take on the market,
like he was saying, lots of opportunities still in the market. And that's a guy who's unbiased. Now let's go look at CNN. Well, Fox News is biased, obviously. They're gonna, they're excited about this W. They're gonna call it a W, but you got to be careful because sometimes they'll inflate how much of a W it is, right? I think Tom Lee is unbiased. He's got no fight in this, in this. But let's listen to what CNN has to say after listening to Fox and listening to Tom Lee. It's a lot different.
To this deal to come up with a longer-term deal.
Nonetheless, it's important to listen to.
Let me give you a short-term reaction and a longer run. The short-term reaction is this is very good news. Our tariffs on China were previously so high it was effectively an embargo. We don't actually have to travel to Geneva for the US government to decide to cut the rate at which it taxes Americans for importing goods from China, but I'm glad that it did. And it's going to create a whole lot of calm for the next few days. The medium run thing to worry about is at the moment, the half-life of a tariff announcement from the White House is around 6 to 8 days. So as encouraged as I am that this is the movement, the direction in which it's moving, I'm not sure that that businesses can be confident that we're going to hit the more harmonious times that we had prior to this administration.
The director of the National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, says that China made certain concessions when it came to allowing U.S. exporters to enter the Chinese market, or certain aspects of the Chinese market. I wonder what you make of that. Is that a win that the White House can point to justify levying these tariffs to begin with?
Oh, it's not a win and it's not a justification, but more to the point, when the White House says we got some concessions, but I'm not telling you what they are, they told us this about the Britain-UK deal, and it turns out that the UK-US deal, that was actually not a deal. It was an agreement to have an agreement at some point in the future. So if it's not written down and signed and they're not willing to show us that.
Well, neither of them are a deal. You can't do a deal that quick, right? They're LOIs at the end of the day, letter of intent. And that's a good thing. That's a good sign. The details are going to come in, and that's where the real negotiating skill sets really are in play here.
Then I'm not sure I believe it.
I do wonder what you think might make some of these tariffs worth it. In other words, what your guideposts are for justifying the trade war that this White House has launched, if they do, in fact, make it so that supply chains are reconfigured and the U.S. is less reliant on China, as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is suggesting the administration will continue to pursue. Do you see that as a win?
Boris, let's not tie ourselves up in knots trying to make sense of something that we can't make sense of. Look, every time the administration's moved towards more tariffs, the markets have fallen. They're very unhappy about this. They think it undermines the profitability of American business. Every time the administration walks back, markets cheer. They think that that's useful economic policy, as does most of the economics establishment. Look, the long-run damage here, I think, is really worth emphasizing. Let me take you back. Remember during COVID, global supply chains became fractured, and there became a lot of talk that what we needed was more robust, reliable supply partners. There was talk of onshoring and friendshoring. Well, this time, something similar is happening, but it's happening in other countries, and it's not caused by a virus, it's caused by the White House. The United States has shown itself to be an unreliable trading partner, and more to the point, its tariff policies change day to day and week to week, and as a result, our foreign trading partners are looking for more robust, more stable, more reliable trading partners, and so already they're starting to diversify away from the United States.
It's so weird to hear somebody say that. The United States has proven they're not a reliable. It's 25% of the GDP, of the global GDP. Where are you replacing that from? It's not that they're not reliable. It's that they're done being taken advantage of, and they know their worth. That's all it is. It's reliable if everybody plays ball. And it sounds like everybody is playing ball. People can say what they want, that, oh, we're back to square one. No, we're not back to square one, because we didn't have reciprocal 10% tariffs in square one, right? And so, let's continue listening.
If the next dozen plus deals look like what's been struck between the U.S. and the U.K. and the U.S. and China, what do you imagine this is going to do to the global economy? Is it actually going to affect some great change?
Not much. So let me characterize the British deal, because I think it's the one that sets the standard for the rest of the world, except for China. The British deal is basically the US has decided, President Trump has decided, in fact, that tariffs on every other country around the world will be 10%. I want you to put that in a big sheet of paper. Let's make it 48-point font. And next to that, there's a little asterisk. The little asterisk says, if you're willing to come to the Rose Garden and put on a dog and pony show and make the president feel good, we'll make a few little carve-outs for you as well. But when you look at the details of the British deal, the 10% is the most important part. The asterisk turns out to be incredibly small. There really were no economically important carve-outs. And so I think other countries around the world right now are looking at this, and they're understanding that the US government doesn't want Americans buying stuff from them, and so they may be looking elsewhere for trading partners.
President Trump hitting pause on his trade war with China. The U.S. and China agreed to roll back drastically the tariffs they've slapped on each other's exports, but only for 90 days while they negotiate a longer deal.
Yeah, we need to go deeper into that UK, because when I first looked at it, the UK American deal, that was it was a developing story. But let's continue talking about this China trade deal. So the U.S. agreed to lower tariffs on Chinese imports from 145% to 30%, while China reduces tariffs on U.S. goods from 125% to 10%. 30% is still a lot, and it's still enough. This volatility is still enough. You know, the guy in CNN, he mentions that people are going to diversify and find other trade partners because, you know, they realize they can't be so dependent on the U.S. You know, which I don't blame them, but at the same time, U.S. brands are going to diversify a bit too, because they're going to realize they can't depend on all of their manufacturing to come from China. So you're going to see places like Turkey, places in Europe, Mexico, Canada. You're going to see their manufacturing increase, and in the U.S. as well. So it's going to grow manufacturing in the U.S. as well. How much isn't? It's not like it's going to replace China, and that's what CNN and Fox, they tend to be so extreme, so binary, this or that, no in between. That's the problem with a lot of these guys, man. And he has a point in that manufacturers are going to look for a more diversified purchasing partners, but it goes both ways. And when you're 25% of the global GDP, it's not just because you have a higher population. It's because Americans the poorest Americans can buy an iPhone. You know, like that's not a reality in most of the world. Now, obviously, they're buying the iPhones on payments and stuff like that, but that's still not a reality for most of the world. So I think it's one of those things, man, where CNN, when it comes to Trump, they're half glass empty. Fox is half glass full, and then you have a little bit in between. You got to kind of gauge both of these media companies. And so, anyways, the scope of reductions, the tariff cuts apply broadly but exclude certain sectors. Notably, the U.S. will maintain higher tariffs on specific goods, including those related to the fentanyl crisis, steel, aluminum, and certain pharmaceuticals. Both nations have established a mechanism for ongoing discussions with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer, representing the U.S., and Vice Premier representing China. These talks may alternate, no disrespect, these talks may alternate between the two countries or occur in a third country upon mutual agreement. So the announcement of the tariff reductions led to a positive response in global financial markets. Major U.S. stock indices, including the S&P 500, everything's been crazy. It's been green. That's the SPY closed at 582.99. It's up 3.24%. iShares China Large Cap ETF rose to $36, a 3.3% increase. And the agreement also provides a temporary reprieve for companies heavily reliant on the U.S.-China trade. For instance, e-commerce platforms like Shein and Temu, which had been affected by the removal of the de minimis duty exemption, can now restock their U.S. inventories at lower cost during the 90-day window. I don't like that. I don't like Shein and Temu's advantage over small businesses here in America who still have to pay de minimis. Meanwhile, these companies are undercutting the small brands who are creating the markets, who are doing the research and development, and we're taking on way more regulatory costs, way more certification costs, way more tariffs, way more taxes. We can't compete even if we wanted to slash our costs because our government is taxing us. Meanwhile, China gets an express pass to our market that we create. That we're the ones that are creating the consumers as well, because 50% of the jobs in America are from small businesses. So it's really unfair. That needs to change. Trump, you gotta work on that. So, anyways, political context. President Donald Trump characterized the agreement as a total reset in U.S.-China relations. I mean, it's better than it was square one, but there still needs to be some improvement for sure. Emphasizing China's commitment to opening its markets to U.S. businesses and removing non-tariff barriers. He highlighted that while the agreement is a significant step, it does not resolve all underlying issues and further negotiations are necessary. Yes, well said. The agreement follows a series of escalations earlier in 2025 where both that was, yeah, it was insane. It was like everybody was bumping their chest. So while the 90-day tariff reduction provides temporary relief, analysts caution that it's a short-term measure. The underlying structure issues in U.S.-China trade relations remain unsolved, and the success of ongoing negotiations will determine whether a more permanent agreement can be reached. Yeah, so we're not in the clear by any means. You know, we're going to see some supply chain issues from the past 4 weeks of being in a trade war with China. So we don't know what's going to go on with that, how that's going to affect on the short term, how that's going to affect us. There might be some issues with that. The other thing is 30% is still a lot. It's still a lot on small businesses. It's still a lot on our margins. So there's still going to be some type of inflation, I think, that's caused by it. And that's going to be based on higher cost on goods. You're seeing products already raise prices, especially in the industry that I'm mainly in, which is the barbering industry. Clipper prices are already increasing, and products are already increasing. Aside from that, you know, we don't know what the details of these trade deals are. Now, on the positive, there's still 200 countries that I know there's a couple dozen countries that are important, that are big in our trade that we have to negotiate with and get into the details. And from my understanding, it's all going to be kind of tailored. Not every single country is going to be the same trade deal like CNN especially is portraying. There's going to be a 10% base is what it sounds like, but the details is what really, really matters here. And we don't know what those are. So that could be a positive thing in the market. That could be a negative thing on the market. The other thing that we're looking at here is there's other things that the Trump administration is doing that could help or hurt the market. That could be the tax bill that they're passing here soon. It could be whether or not they're going to lower interest rates, the Federal Reserve, because of, I mean, look at the real estate market. It's kind of weird. And if things stay if inflation keeps creeping, they got to make some adjustments there. So man, there's so much going on here. Going on here. But at the end of the day, man, it's green. What I decided to do, this is not financial advice at all, was I closed a lot of my my open puts that I had sold, and I took profits. I still have a few open, but I'm looking this week to see more, to see what's going on. Is this going to be a new standard? Is this going to be the market, right? And we're either going to go up or a little bit from here, or it was just a market high, and this week is going to be, nothing but bad news. We'll see. But I'm going to make some decisions here probably tomorrow, see if I'm going to get back into any stocks. And I'm definitely going to keep live streaming and letting you guys know. Cool. Man, there's so many things going on in the world right now. Let me see. All right, let's take a look at Kevin Hassett actually. Yeah, so this is what I was saying. It's still a big deal, but 30% is still a lot. Still a lot.
Peter Baker, also NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans, and professor of economics and public policy at the University of Michigan, Justin Wolfers. Peter, I'm going to get to you on what happened to the External Revenue Service in a moment, but I want to start with you, Christine, on what we've seen happening today and why it feels like a win, yes, but it's still very confusing and unclear why the trade war ever started to begin with.
Yeah, we've seen the president step back from what he said was needed and necessary to bring manufacturing back to the United States and remake global trade. And it was something that obviously the consensus on Wall Street was that it was a bad idea, the trade policy. And so you had seen the fits and starts on Wall Street for 6 weeks now. Now you've got the Dow back where it was before Liberation Day in the Rose Garden.
Which is good if you are looking at your
that journey
401k
has been
today.
something. But you do have the Chamber of Commerce, for example, saying, while we are so glad the president stepped back from the worst of these tariffs, they said we still think that there should be provisions for different industries to opt out so they don't lose jobs, and reminding people this is still much higher tariff levels than the U.S. is used to.
How do you plan for this 90-day pause if you are a business that manufactures overseas and you need to figure out what sort of stock you need for the holiday season and what price you should be putting on it?
I mean, do you try to go to Cambodia or India, but you don't know what those tariffs are going to be because another pause deadline is the beginning of July for new tariffs on those countries as well. So as a business, I don't know how you really plan when it's really trade policy in fits and starts. So there's much relief that the president has backed off these big tariffs, the worst of these tariffs. He did say today also in the Oval Office that he doesn't think if this pause expires, he'd go back all the way up to 145%. So
what is it, 130%?
So unclear. And again, that lack of clarity is something that's difficult as a business owner.
Peter, can you help us understand what happened behind the scenes?
Well, look, I think everything that Christine is talking about has obviously influenced the people around the president. They don't want, obviously, to head into a global recession. They don't want to have empty shelves. He may talk about how we can get by with fewer dolls and pencils, but the truth is, shortage on consumer goods is never good politics. So, you can make the argument, and I think his people do make the argument, this is all part of his technique of negotiating. You go high at the beginning, you act tough, you beat your chest, you say, I'm going to absolutely destroy you with these monster tariffs, and then you sit down and actually start to cut deals that bring it back down to normal or closer to normal. But I think you're right, Katie, to point out that this is still not normal, right? And Christine and Justin are smarter about this than I am, but it seems to me that a 30% tariff is still a 30% potential increase in the cost of goods, or let's say even half of that is passed along to the consumer. Let's just say it's 15% higher prices on consumer goods. That's higher than the highest inflation rate during the Biden presidency. And inflation was one of the things that killed Biden's presidency politically. So, 30% is obviously a whole lot different than 145%. I think what people are taking from that is a sign of a de-escalation, and they hope for a further de-escalation. But let's remember that 30%, as you rightly said, Katie, is still a big deal.
But what about the External Revenue Service? Because Donald Trump, in levying these tariffs, touted this idea that we would have so much money coming into the country because of these tariffs, the tax on other nations, he argued, that we would be able to get rid of income taxes for maybe just the middle class. Is that no longer being discussed?
I mean, look, if your goal is to have tariffs stay high, then in theory, you can bring in some revenue, right? But if you have zero ships coming from China, and remember on Friday, there was a 12-hour period reported there was zero ships leaving Chinese ports to bring consumer goods to West.
Did you guys hear that? And I was telling you, people were like, oh, that's hurting America. What does that mean when there's zero ships leaving Chinese ports? That means factories are not working. They're not open for business, and people are like, oh, they're replacing them. They're going. There's no country that can replace how big of a market America is. It's hurting everybody.
West Coast ports, that means you're not going to collect tariffs because nobody's bringing in any imports. So you're not going to get those high in the sky, pie in the sky revenue in, estimates that the president liked to throw out there if you're not actually importing goods because people don't want to pay.
So this is why I'm loving tech right now, tech stocks, especially the ones that aren't affected by China. You got like Palantir, for example, Nvidia. These guys are not Tesla. They're not so worried about the Chinese market. Don't get me wrong, Tesla is affected because they're not selling cars over there right now, but not as badly, right? So there's still a lot of opportunity there.
That much more for goods. And that's part of the point is he has contradictory goals here. Is the goal to collect money and replace the income tax, in which case that's one thing? Or is the goal to set tariffs so high that you spur domestic manufacturing and economic growth, which is a different thing, in which you wouldn't be collecting tariffs. You'd be, in fact, using tariffs as a barrier to anything actually coming in. And he talked.
That's my point, though. I think you can do both. Because think about it. Look, I have a business. My mindset now these days is like, yo, what can I do that is manufactured here in America? What can I do that can be manufactured in another country? And then, you know, I'll keep my partners in China for now, for the time being, because they've lowered the tariffs. But in the long term, we're not going to forget this. We're not going to forget how this affected and scared us. And the last thing that a good company wants to do is be disrupted by somebody else because they weren't playing chess. So there's going to be a lot of companies that are moving manufacturing here, that are moving manufacturing and diversifying. It goes both ways, guys. And our market's bigger. You know, at the end of the day, I'm not saying China's market isn't huge, but at the end of the day, our economy is not from manufacturing. And therefore, we can still be consumers. We can still make money because most of Americans, look, our unemployment's at like 4%. Where are the jobs coming from? It's not manufacturing. We'll be fine, I think. So, you know, in the long term, I'm more than happy betting on America. But I will say, you know, you still have to tread lightly. You still have to see what's going on. Now, with that being said, man, Scott Bessent was on this interview, and he was asked about how the negotiations, how the talks went. So this is the Treasury Secretary. Let's take a listen to him.
Enemies in the world, we were firm and we moved forward. We tried to identify shared interest. We came with a list of problems that we were trying to solve, and I think we did a good job on that. And again, this is a 90-day pause. For our tariff program, we had a plan, we had a process, and now what we have with the Chinese is a mechanism to avoid an upward tariff pressure like we did last time. So this is a 90-day pause.
Do you expect that tone to continue as these details, you know, the devil's always in the details, get worked out over the next 90 days? And what aspects do you think will be relatively easy, and what will present the biggest obstacles?
Well, look, Joe, I don't think anything's going to be easy because this has been going on a long time. But what I can tell you, President Trump in his first term realized a very effective trade deal that was signed in the Oval Office in January 2020. And the Chinese delegation basically messaged to us that the Biden administration failed to hold them accountable for it. So I think that the January 2020, President Trump's highly successful previous trade deal can be a starting point. And knowing that President Trump will enforce any deal, I think will make the Chinese very deliberate in their negotiations and know that whatever they agree to, President Trump will enforce.
Would you say that the Chinese, were you able to detect, or was it apparent that there was some urgency to make some progress, given what we're hearing about Chinese businesses being shuttered en masse, factory activity declining, PMI declining, maybe even some social unrest? Could you detect that, or was there, for lack of a better term, a stiff upper lip shown to you?
Look, the vice premier is a very skilled negotiator. He is a high-ranking Chinese official. I had a very good economic briefing beforehand, but there was no sense of anxiety. There was a sense of moving forward. There was a sense of mutual respect. There was a sense that we had shared interests. But I have seen what's going on in the Chinese economy. We can see what's going on with the shipments to the U.S. And again, we are the deficit country. Historically, the deficit country has a better negotiating position.
Mr. Secretary, part of China's plan over the last several years has been to manufacture far more goods than it can ever consume. It exports that not only to the United States, but to other countries around the world. Other countries like the United States and countries in Europe have felt like they're getting dumped on with all of these excess goods that are being manufactured. Will your talks in other countries find ways to make sure that China can't get around anything you set up in your deals with China by, let's say, shipping goods to Mexico and having that come up, those goods come up through Mexico? How do you shut that down? And did that come up this weekend?
Well, Becky, that's already happening. That's already happening with many goods. You know, it's happening with autos. It's happening with electronics.
And pausing de minimis isn't going to help.
So that's part of the negotiation with the Mexican government. That's it's part of our overall strategy. And
do you guys remember when people were like, what the heck? In the beginning when they were doing the trade deals and everyone was on the list except for China. And in the beginning, they focused on Canada and Mexico the most. People are like, why are you going after Canada and Mexico? And they're complying with a lot of the stuff that you guys want, like the fentanyl, like making sure the border, that they supported the border and had military there. And both of them complied, but it was more than that. It was really trying to get the tariffs in a way where, once we started negotiating with China, they couldn't get through the Panama Canal, through Mexico, and through Canada to just use loopholes to get around the negotiations that we were already doing. So, they're not stupid at the end of the day. These are smart people.
And Chinese have an economic plan called dual circulation. And with dual circulation, our goal is to make sure dual circulation means export and domestic use. Dual circulation cannot mean that China overproduces and that only Chinese goods are consumed in China and then they export the excess to the rest of the world. So we have had the equivalent, because of these high tariff rates.
By the way, that's what they were doing during the pandemic with pharmaceuticals.
Of an embargo on China, and those goods are going to leak to the rest of the world. So, our negotiations, we don't need to tell other countries what they need to do. They are seeing this wave of Chinese goods coming to their shore. They have to find a home. And
here's the other thing. When all this was happening, there was a crazy amount of propaganda that was on TikTok, on Instagram, and pretty much it was, Chinese citizens saying things like, we don't need America. We make our own toothpaste. We make our own deodorant. We make our own stuff. We're going to be fine because we make everything. So we're not going to run out of stuff like America is. Yeah, that sounds good, but that's not the point. I mean, we're going to be fine too. And I think that's why Trump says things like, okay, we're not going to have 30 dolls. We'll have $5 for the kids, right? I think that's a good sacrifice for the long term and for the better of the future of our country, right? That's what Trump was saying. He was criticized for that. But the reason why I think he said it was mostly because, China, sure, they're going to have materials, they're going to have stuff, they're going to have products. Yes, but that's not how China's economy thrives. They have to make an excess of what they need so that they can export it and make income. Problem is that a lot of their products, listen, when you have billions of people and the average income of those billions of people is $8,000 a year, that's the average income. These people are not buying, the expensive products that China sells and exports to America, right? So there's going to be a surplus of product just sitting on shelves. It's absolutely going to affect China. Absolutely. So, the surplus thing is one of those things where they have to be careful that they're not unloading and all that. But this is also why I think long term, America's going to be good. China is too, don't get me wrong, but America's more than good. Let's continue listening.
And that could be at a discount price, undercutting local producers.
Mr. Secretary, I have a question for you.
And that's the point. You know, that's what they're doing on Shein. That's what Temu is. That's what AliExpress is. It's just excess junk, bro, that they're unloading to other markets at very cheap prices because they might as well. They might as well. It's like overstock for them. And it makes it impossible for local brands to compete. Say that one more time, Scott.
Price, undercutting local producers.
Say that one more time.
That could be at a discount for sure. They have to find a home, and that could be at a discount price, undercutting local producers.
So you guys get that? Like, you know, China at the end of the day can make as much as they want and then offload it to other countries. But the negative impact on that is all of that overstock. It's not being sold to be competitive. It's just being sold to not take a loss. They're happy with breaking even. And that really hurts our local brands that create the jobs. There's a trickle effect there. So, you know, I know some people won't care, especially people who don't run businesses, who don't understand the broader issues with all of this, challenges with all of this, you know, and how it affects the future of our country, like our kids. There's some people who just don't give a damn, but I'm glad that our country's leaders right now do. So with that being said, man, let's move on to the next story here. I have not caught up with what's going on with this Newark, New Jersey mayor who got arrested for, I guess they were protesting at an ICE facility, and they're saying that, you know, the mayor got arrested for whatever reason. He's saying he got arrested for no reason. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because New Jersey's, that Newark, that same airport in Newark is having all kinds of issues. And it's like, you got no business getting arrested out here, bro, when you have a crisis at your airport. You know, but two things could be true. That he could be fighting, you know, several things that he wants to fight for his city. But I wonder how this is all affecting, if it's him, if it's really his, you know, if it's his fault or whatever. But let's give him a fair shake. Let's keep an open mind. Maybe Trump's administration did go OD and arrest him for no reason. Let's check it out.
This is the mayor of the largest city. You are here on private property. On private property.
All right, this is the last. I'm not pinned. Listen, this is the last warning.
Oh, it's Congresswoman. Let's show some respect.
Is that private property?
Respect.
All her man.
You have no respect.
Listen,
what does it mean?
Congressmen are different. Congresswomen are different. Mr. Mayor, anyone that is not a congresswoman or man, step out. It's the last warning. You will be placed on arrest.
Just tell me. Don't
rush in. Don't rush in.
No.
No, please. We're at a gate. Back up.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. Shame on you people.
They're saying that because he was on this side, that he
Yeah, so apparently a lot of the facilities are private property, contract detention facilities. So they are affiliated with the government, but they're not owned by the government. So trespassing laws generally do apply.
Where's my congresswoman?
Wait, so he was inside the facility. He was inside this gate, this side of the gate, it looks like. And he did leave the gate, but he stayed on.
We're at a gate. Back up.
But he was still in the parking lot.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. Shame on you people.
They're saying that because he was on this side, that
because he was on this side, they are going to arrest him. I mean, he was past these gates. He was inside the facility. He did break it. Technically, he did break into private property. But I mean,
Where's my congresswoman? Where's my congresswoman?
they're about to lock his ass up. Body cam.
It's on the cut. It's on the cut. Call the coach on the coach. Calm down. Calm down. I'm not resisting. I know.
Hell nah, you're not resisting. Hell nah, you ain't. Don't do it. So I gotta hear this opinion. This is democracy now. You guys know Ross is the mayor of Newark, is part of the Democratic Party. Let's see what this lady has to say.
Democracy depends on a free press. Please support our independent journalism at democracy.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Newark Mayor Ras Baraka, the mayor of the largest city in New Jersey, was arrested Friday and detained by masked federal immigration police when he went to a newly reopened private 1,000-bed Immigration and Customs Enforcement jail called Delaney Hall. He says he was there to support 3 Congress members set to tour the facility: Bonnie Watson-Coleman, LaMonica McIver, and Rob Menendez. Newark Mayor Baraka says he was asked to leave the premises and did so. He'd gone to the other side of the fence, the Newark public property side, away from the Congress members, was on a public street when he was seized by officers in a chaotic scene.
Yeah, that's wrong. If that's true, that's wrong.
Now, circle the mayor. Circle the mayor. What the hell? Circle the mayor. Circle the mayor. Circle the mayor. What the heck?
What do you think that's gonna do? Talk about circling the mayor. You're not above the police either. The circle on the mayor shit is stupid.
As the ICE agents handcuffed Mayor Baraka, the 3 Democratic Congress members, Menendez, McIver, and Coleman, tried to wrap their arms around him to protect him.
Hey, they stood on
After he
business,
was
so
arrested, a crowd of hundreds gathered demanding he be released. He was charged with trespassing and later released and addressed supporters.
I didn't know that this morning when I woke up that I'll be in this detention facility here, that I would end up incarcerated for something that I believe is my democratic right to show up and speak out against what I think was happening there. A violation of city and state.
Didn't they just say he was invited there to tour the facility and then he was asked to leave? Now he's saying he did show up there to protest.
Laws and a lack of transparency.
Meanwhile, a Department of Homeland Security spokesperson accused the New Jersey Congress members at the scene of assaulting ICE officers, warned they still may face arrest. We'll speak with 80-year-old Congressmember Bonnie.
All right, so here's the thing. He was not invited to tour the facility. They attempted to conduct an oversight visit to the facility, but were denied entry by federal agents. So, like, they thought they were above ICE because he's the mayor, right? They're the Democratic Party. So they're like, we're going to go do an oversight visit because we don't support ICE, right? And they must not known that was private property. And so despite leaving restricted area when asked, Baraka was later arrested outside the facility, leading to a confrontation that included allegations of physical altercations between federal agents and the lawmakers. So I don't know. You guys can look at the video. It did look like he left when they asked him to. He was in the parking lot still. there were still a lot of people there. Is the parking lot still private property? I don't know. But even when he left, you know, when he was still on the private property, there were people still there protesting in the parking lot. But they didn't. It sounded like when, you know, listening to the body cam, it sounded like they said because he crossed the fence and he was inside, he broke in, you know, and that's why they arrested him. That's what it sounded like. But he was released later that evening on an unsecured bond, and he has a court appearance May 15th. He's maintained that he's done nothing wrong, but there's been definitely some protest ever since his arrest. Check it out.
No, you don't. Yes, I do. He's lucky. Take the mask off.
We are witnessing in real time the black bagging, snatching, and disappearance of our people.
Chris is the mayor of the largest city. You
We have fought time and again to oppose everyone's rights.
Why they got it circled like that?
In this moment, what we are seeing is the reality.
Okay.
Hezbollah, denounce them now! Let's do it!
This is a moment to continue to push back.
Look, they're getting look. These are two. This is what I mean by it. Shout out to them when it's convenient, but this is two examples of two extremes. Like they about to fight over this. They acting like children, bro. Look at this.
That's what you are, socialist! 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 You're getting in my way. You're getting in my way. Stop pushing. I'm getting in my way. Stop pushing. You can't just push me. Socialist! Pushing me. Socialist! Call him! Call him! Socialist! Socialist! That's what you are, socialist!
This is tough.
Socialist! You hate America! You hate America! You gotta keep your distance. God loves you. You gotta keep your distance. You're beautiful. God loves you. You gotta keep your distance. You're beautiful. God loves you. We want Trump! We want Trump! What are you doing? You want me to go? You want me to go?
My thing is, why can't he be there yelling, "We love Trump, we love Trump"? Like, they're all protesting. They're just going to protest each other. So why y'all harassing the guy? He can stand there and yell, "We love Trump." You guys got the mics and can yell your shit. Like, it gets to a point where people start unplugging people's mics and blocking people. And look, look at this. It's too much, man.
Viva Trump! Viva Trump! Viva Trump! Get on my face, bro.
Look.
Get on my face. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. I don't fear you, bro.
This guy.
I have the right to be here. I have the right to
multiple people. He's hit multiple people.
You guys stand back too. You guys stand back too.
Wow, new jacket. Mr. Dang, you got a new jacket.
Now they're escorting him out. It reminds me of like in school when the teacher sees you hit, but you were defending yourself, you know? All right, let's look at the Department of Homeland Security, their response to the mayor.
Let's talk about the facility, because what the mayor says, and he's been saying for several days, is that you all don't have the proper permitting, or at least the facility owned by Geo Group, a private company that's contracted with the federal government, does not have the proper permitting, the certificate of occupancy, and there are some violations. To that, you say what?
That is flat out false. That is just political gamesmanship. We have the proper permitting. We've gone through proper inspections. It's a joke. And by the way, He should. This is a guy who is going and storming an ICE detention facility. He's putting detainees at risk. He's putting law enforcement at risk. He's joined by a mob of people who have said we should end ICE. This is nothing more than political games, and we're not playing.
So there's a.
Yeah, that's what it's starting to. I don't want to seem like I'm biased here, but that's what it's starting to look like. You know, I don't honest when they were saying, you know, he was invited there to do a tour of the facility. No, it's you don't like ICE. You think that they shouldn't be there with that facility, and you were gonna go there with your mob and your lawmakers and oversee that they're doing the right thing, but you didn't know that was private property you just broke into. And ICE is like, yo, we gonna make an example of Ross. We're gonna make an example of him.
A member of Congress, LaMonica McIver, who says that she told USA Today that ICE asked the mayor to leave. He did. And from the video that I've seen, when he was taken into custody, he was on public property. He was no longer on the private property of Geo Group. So if he,
I can't wait for this response, because that's what it did seem like. It seemed like he left when they told him to. He was still in the parking lot. But now I feel like it's OD that you arrested him when he's in the parking lot. You know, like obviously he's leaving, even though some of his supporters were still being a nuisance. The mayor wasn't, it seemed like. But I could be wrong here. Let's see what she has to say. They could just be making an example of him, because the audacity for you to pull up like you run something around here. Bro, like, what's wrong with you? Pulling up, coming into our facility. They just trying to make an announcement.
If he was asked to leave.
I mean, not an example out of him. But, again, I don't know if that was justified. And I could see a lawsuit coming in.
And then he complied. Why then take him into custody?
Whether you're a civilian, a mayor, or a member of Congress, if you are storming an ICE detention facility and putting law enforcement and detainees at risk, you can bet that we will arrest you and you will face the law. You will face justice. These other members of Congress will as well, as will the other protesters, some of which were arrested.
Okay, so we've got the mayor coming up in just a moment, but while I have you, I want to ask you about this reporting that the president.
Yeah, I think it's just making an example. It's just cuz, you know what I mean? Like, bro, the audacity for you to pull up, bro, with a mob full of people, all these protesters, all these lawmakers, walk into our facility uninvited, like past the no trespassing gates on private property. You know what? We understand you left, but the police, they came from the other side of the block with their mind made up. They're arresting you. So whether they saw you in the parking lot on the other side of the fence, they knew you broke in, they were going to arrest you regardless. They just wanted to make an example. I get it, because I feel like when it's the other way around, they do their thing. Look at all the things that they did when Biden was in office to Republican people. It's stupid. It's childish. It's high school politics, but I understand why they're doing it. I think at the end of the day, it's unproductive. It doesn't help. But at the same time, bro, the people voted. The people voted for illegal immigration reform and changes. And that's what this administration is doing. And a lot of these Democrats who lost, by the way, you know the American people voted for something. You lost. And at the end of the day, there's checks and balances. And what's happening here, and it's happening on both sides, right? Where, you know, there's laws, and the Democratic Party, they don't want to enforce the laws that are passed, the bills, the executive orders. They don't want to regulate them. They don't want to enforce them. And it happens the other way around as well. It's just this time it's the Democrats trying to be, you know, pushed back, because at the local level, the people voted Democratic. And so they're going to push back. And so the people on the local level are probably happy with what the mayor's doing. But on the federal level, and maybe at the state level, I'm not sure, people don't want this illegal immigration stuff going on anymore. So this is one thing that I can say that I love about our country, man. Like, whether it's perfect or not, you know, there's pushback, there's checks and balances, and I think at the end of the day, this is a nothing burger. I think the mayor should be released. I think they shouldn't make any more of it. They made their point. Don't pull up no more. Don't pull up and break in no more. You know, but we shouldn't be wasting tax dollars, bring this guy to court, put him in jail. Like, that's just too much, in my opinion. What do you guys think? Let me know, chat. All right. Now, I was watching all of that to say the same mayor in the same city is having real issues here with their airport, and this affects the entire country, if not other countries as well. I want to go ahead and watch this. Let's check it out.
Controllers at Newark International Airport in New Jersey were, quote, traumatized after equipment failures cut off communication with planes 2 weeks ago. And now 5 controllers are out on paid leave. And customers at Newark are dealing with another week of disastrous delays. CNN's Bryn Gingras is on the ground at Newark Liberty International Airport. And CNN's Pete Montine is here with the latest. Pete, let me start with you. You've been on top of this story all day. Tell us exactly what you've learned about why exactly these delays are happening and what in the hell is going on at Newark.
Well, the FAA is now essentially confirming our reporting that really paints the best picture yet of why these delays have persisted for days. A source familiar with an incident last Monday tells me that this all goes back to a period of time when controllers in the facility responsible for flights arriving and departing from Newark Liberty International Airport lost radio communications and their radar systems for an undisclosed time last Monday. That led to 5 air traffic controllers in that radar facility to take what's called trauma leave. They are now on leave for the next 45 days, something they're legally entitled to do. I want you to listen now to the new audio we just got from liveatc.net, and I want you to hear the frustration of the air traffic controller in this Newark facility that controls flights going in and out of Newark, and he's telling a smaller plane, a general aviation plane, that he does not have the ability to see that plane on radar and to essentially go away. Listen.
We lost our radar and it's not working correctly. Radar service terminates, squawk VFR, green change approved. If you want a Bravo clearance, you can just call the towers when you get closer.
Okay, I'll wait for that frequency from you, okay?
Okay, no, just squawk VFR, look up the tower frequencies, and we don't have a radar, so I don't know where you are.
We also heard today from Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer, who says while the FAA has been investigating its own incident here, the Department of Transportation Office of Inspector General now has to launch a probe immediately, he says. He also points back to a move by the FAA last July in which it moved the facility responsible for Newark airspace from Long Island to Philadelphia. The whole idea there was to shore up staffing shortages. Schumer says this, in essence, backfired. There are some pretty big questions here that people are asking about. Why can't controllers be drag and dropped essentially from one place to another? These are location-specific jobs. It's not that easy. The FAA is not really detailing a fix in the near term right now, Jake.
And Bryn, another day of major delays at Newark International Airport. What are you hearing from customers?
Yeah, Jake, let's put it this way. If you have a flight in or out of Newark that hasn't been delayed or canceled, go outside, buy a lottery ticket right now, because that's all we're seeing on the boards. As you look at the Terminal A departures, we're in Terminal B. Now, Terminal A here at Newark typically has those domestic flights, but you can see delayed, delayed, delayed. It gets even worse when the screen changes. Terminal B, where we are, like I said, a lot of international flights, but again, some of it is open for check-in hours early, but it really is not a big surprise if you actually see that check-in too delayed. It's very rare to see a flight take off at Newark. It is that bad, and we are now into the 8th day of these disruptions for travelers, and people are at their wits' end. Actually, someone just walked by us and says, I'm going to kill somebody. They're so angry. That's what we're seeing, is anger and a lot of frustration. Take a listen to one traveler.
Now I have to kind of request time off, which sometimes that can turn into penalties for me because it's last minute. And I'm an hourly worker, so I don't get benefits. So I can't even kind of like compensate that lost time. Like, oh, I can just use my sick hours. I don't have the luxury of doing so.
Yeah, it really is the perfect storm here at Newark. We are actually having low cloud cover here at the airport. It's those issues that Pete was just describing to you. It's the fact that there's a runway actually closed here at Newark for renovations. And then it's just the antiquated system that this airline, these airports are running on. It's a big issue, and it's really just trickling down to these travelers who have, quite frankly, had enough. Jake.
The union representing air traffic controllers is speaking out about the critical staffing shortage that's causing major problems at Newark Liberty International Airport. For the 8th straight day, hundreds of flights have been canceled or delayed.
There's a lot of delays and cancellations, and now the union and a separate CNN source familiar with the situation say it is, in part, get this, because several air traffic controllers had to take a leave of absence last month after equipment problems cut off communication with the planes and left them traumatized. CNN aviation correspondent Pete Montine joins us now. I mean, I read that earlier, Pete, and I thought, how bad did it have to be that they were at the point where they were too traumatized to come to work? This is awful and scary.
These new developments really paint the best picture yet of why we've
because it's the equipment that's screwing them over, and they're the ones taking all the heat for it.
Had these 8 days of delays for flights going into and out of Newark. Here is the latest. This all goes back to an incident last Monday at the key radar facility responsible for flights departing and approaching Newark. And a source familiar with that incident tells me that controllers there lost both radio communications and a picture on their radar scopes for an undisclosed time, meaning those controllers were essentially trying to do their jobs blind. They call it NORDO, no radio, which led to at least 5 controllers taking what's called trauma leave, which they're legally allowed to do. They're now off for the next 45 days. This is a huge development. And we know that the FAA has been investigating the cause of the equipment outage that triggered these staffing shortages. Just last week, the FAA acting chief told me a team has been on the ground to figure out the nature of that equipment problem. But now Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer.
Nice union, you know what I mean? Like trauma, 45-day leave. I ain't gonna lie, bro. This might sound insensitive, but 45 days for trauma because the equipment was down. This is your job, bro. Like, am I tripping here? Do you know the trauma that man? This honestly, this is what I've noticed happens with overly liberal cities, bro. It's just, I don't know, man. Like, discomfort like this is 45 days. And now everybody is screwed. That airport is screwed for 45 days. This is why this is what is created by everyone gets trophies types of sports as well. Bro, when you're in a highly stressful environment, you're supposed to come together as a team. Not go, I'm out. I feel so bad for the people who are still there. Imagine, give them people a year trauma leave. The ones that are sticking it out, give them a hell of a bonus. The ones that are still there sticking it out, because
is calling for the Department of Transportation Inspector General to launch a probe immediately. This is what he said about the outage at that Newark radar facility. He says the equipment there is aging and it must be fixed yesterday. Listen.
The technology is old and must be updated. It was one of the things that happened at Newark is a copper wire burnt. Why are we using copper wire in 2025? Have they heard of fiber?
That soundbite is a heater and he flew it right over the plate. Copper wire, he says, is the cause of this issue initially. Schumer also called out the FAA's move of that Newark radar facility from Long Island, New York to Philadelphia. The FAA did that last July in hopes of enticing new hires and shoring up its staffing problems. Schumer says it's actually made problems worse. Newark is really emblematic, though, of the air traffic control staffing problems nationwide, and the Union of Air Traffic Controllers says there's still 3,000 controllers short nationwide. They're also clarifying this one point. Last Friday, United Airlines CEO Scott Kirby sent out a memo to passengers, in which he said that controllers walked off the job. That union says it's unfair because controllers were traumatized and they took this leave, once again, something that they're legally allowed to do.
That is a lot. I'm still, I have to say, honestly, you're processing all of it. We did also want to ask you about.
I don't care what nobody says. This is the negative effect of over unionized workers. Like, it gets abusive at some point.
There's some new reporting you have about the Army pausing helicopter flights here in D.C.
The big thing here is this all stems back to an incident last Thursday. It was about 2:30 in the afternoon when planes were coming into Reagan National Airport, and this helicopter from the same Army battalion that was involved in that mid-air collision back on January 29th was arriving at the Pentagon, not too far away. We're talking as the crow flies, maybe a half mile, maybe not even. And so the controller in the tower there at Reagan National Airport told these flights to go around because that controller feared that these airplanes and helicopter were ultimately getting too close to one another. Nobody hurt in this. Those planes came back around and did successful landings. There's been a bit of a scuttlebutt here about why the helicopter was there, if it was supposed to be flying around the Pentagon, if they were taking the scenic route, that's what the FAA initially said, or if they were not actually cleared to land at the Pentagon and told to go around once themselves. So now the big development here is that the Army says it is suspending flights by the 12th Aviation Battalion around the Pentagon.
Crazy. All right, let's see what the mayor of Newark, same one who got arrested, has to say about it. And I'm not trying to villainize it. They're two separate things. It could be that he's worried about the wrong things, man.
And communications meltdowns at Newark Airport last week led to ongoing delays and cancellations for thousands. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy is now pushing a new plan to overhaul the country's air traffic control systems. It includes rebuilding aging control towers, adding 25,000 new radios, and replacing hundreds of old radars. And joining us now is Newark Mayor Ras Baraka. He's also a Democratic candidate for governor of New Jersey.
And I want to point out, there's not much that the mayor could do besides publicly advocate for more help. This is a federal thing. This is an FAA thing, the Federal Aviation Administration. So the only thing I would say is, like, our mayor here in Tampa, man, she advocates like crazy for the FAA to do work in TPA. TPA is, I think, the #1 most efficient airport in the whole country at this point. So I do think that you can advocate and you can push, you can influence in some way, shape, or form, the same way that he's trying to advocate and influence for ICE to get out of his city because he likes illegal immigration. He should be doing that, for obviously transportation. But it sounds like he's starting to do so now. I mean, at the same time, he's not an airline expert, an aviation expert. He probably didn't know that this was going to happen. Nonetheless, they had really old equipment, and hopefully this is something that doesn't occur in the future because the FAA, now they're going to have some real pressure on them. And the mayor should be on top of their ass now.
Mayor, thanks for spending some time with us. Happy Friday to you. Your city has been in the headlines this past week or even a couple of weeks now for all the wrong reasons. How concerned are you with the safety of air travel over your city?
Well, I mean, one, I am concerned about the chaos that's happening over at the airport because.
But what about ICE? I'm just kidding.
The airspace and the crowded airspace, the cancellations and the delays of flights, I think is what needs to happen. They need to delay flights. They need to cancel flights to make sure people are not flying in the air blind. And part of that is because the airspace is too crowded. I like what the Sean Duffy is doing right now. And you have to give them kudos. I'm glad they moved away from blaming this on diversity, equity, and inclusion and start understanding that there are some real equipment failures that they want to repair, replacing some real infrastructure issues and hiring more air traffic controllers. But there's too many planes in the air. I think they need to slow down, put some space between the flights, and begin to lessen the amount.
Wouldn't diversity be solved if we just hired? Like, there's a demand for these jobs. There's not enough supply. Everybody should just be getting hired. Everyone should just be getting hired, right?
The amount of flights that are coming out of there now until they get this thing fixed in terms of a short-term fix.
Yeah, I mean, this longer-term plan could take 3 to 4 years, according to Secretary Duffy, and that's pending funding from Congress. That plan, again, includes thousands of new radios, network connections, new radars, rebuilding control towers. That does sound like a lot. Just on a local level, what do you think is the biggest need and needed most urgently right now to ensure safety of its airspace?
Well, space between the flights. You need to put some space between the flights. You need to slow the number of flights that are coming in and out of that airport. They need to speed up the construction of the new runway that's happening there, which is also an impediment to what's going on. And there needs to be some emergency hires, air traffic control, some emergency hires right away to put more people, more staff in there to make sure that they are able to speak to and control what's happening in the air. Some of the technology upgrades they want to do is fine, but they need to make sure they repair the radar systems that exist now in the short term so people are just safe in the air, so we have confidence of travelers at our airport again.
Mayor, we just confirmed from the FAA there was an outage this morning to radar screens. It was just in certain sectors at about 4 a.m. It lasted for about 90 seconds. What's your reaction?
Well, it's horrible, and it's speaks to some of the incidents we've been seeing nationally in the air. And this has to be an urgent matter. We don't have time to go back and forth with political wrangling about who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah.
We need to put some air traffic controllers in place now.
Well said.
We need to fix those radar systems now, and we need to slow the planes down. We need to put space between the planes that are coming in and out of those airports. Yep.
Right. But
it's hard to slow him down because of the man, but well said. It's not about pointing the finger. It's about getting solutions. It's not just a Newark issue. It piggybacks off of all the challenges that this mayor has been headlining, and so it's just kind of inconvenient that this is the timing, right? Nonetheless, it's been a federal issue. I don't know what is going on with all these planes. All of a sudden, Trump comes into office, and I don't know who's to blame. Not trying to point fingers like this mayor says, but it's happening all over the country with these airplanes, man, with the FAA. And it's got to get fixed. It will get fixed. But now let's this was good to know, and I think it's just a temporary thing. Luckily, I'm in Florida, so I feel bad for anybody who's been affected by this. I know it's affected that entire region. So anyways, let's go ahead and switch stories, guys. Did you guys know about what happened to Tory Lanez? Tory Lanez apparently got stabbed, and he's in the hospital while in prison. Yeah. Check this out. My wife was looking at me. We're both Tory Lanez fans, so.
A possible shooting just occurred. 1809.
Of course, they're showing Megan Thee Stallion.
I'm still anxious. I'm still having nightmares. I'm still just mentally.
Entertainment Tonight. The man just got stabbed. We know about this. They're trying to villainize him. All right, go,
messed
go.
up.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying if look, I didn't love the evidence that put him away. I'm not saying that like what happened to Megan Thee Stallion is sad and it shouldn't happen to anybody and it's wrong. We are fans of Tory Lanez. I just didn't see all the evidence that, to me, was like a slam dunk. He did it, and 10 years in prison is tough. But, yeah, let's continue.
Rapper Tory Lanez, who's currently serving a decade in prison for shooting Megan Thee Stallion, stabbed behind bars. According to TMZ sources, the hip-hop star was in the yard of this Supermax state facility in California when he was attacked by another inmate. He was rushed by ambulance about an hour away to a hospital in Bakersfield. His injuries are said to be non-life-threatening. Just last week, he somehow shared this photo to Instagram and bragged about his new album dropping this summer.
Tory was getting swole, though. Bro was getting swole. Somehow. You all these people got phones now.
She took my heart, filled it with nothing but pain.
So talented.
Were you afraid for your life at that time?
I was really scared.
Tory's been behind bars since 2022 when he was convicted on 3 felonies related to shooting Meghan after a house party in Hollywood 2 years prior.
Is your client remorseful?
He is incredibly remorseful and ashamed and embarrassed that all of this happened.
And the two are still at war. Last fall, she filed suit against a blogger she claims is cyber-stalking her on Tory's behalf.
You said in order to be heard, you need to speak. I never let people see me be so vulnerable. I feel like I'm in such a fresh space.
Wasn't that the weirdest couple though? She about 6 foot, Tory's about 5'3". Anyways, let me give you guys some details on this. So, you know, obviously Entertainment Tonight doesn't rock with Tory, so they didn't give the details like I thought they would. So he got stabbed at the California Correctional Institution. It's in Tehachapi or something like that. But this is where it gets kind of crazy, and it's going to be interesting to see Tory Lanez in the future appear publicly, because apparently he was stabbed multiple times to the face. He's in stable condition, and I don't know how. Supposedly he was bleeding pretty bad, and that the cuts to the face were pretty bad. Obviously he's alive, but stab wounds to the face, bro. That's according to the San Francisco Chronicle. Don't know nothing about them. You guys, you know, take that for what it is. They're currently investigating the incident. I'll keep up with it as much as I can, but the DA is on it, according to the New York Post. Yeah, he's serving a 10-year prison sentence. He's scheduled to be released in 2029. And Megan Thee Stallion was granted a 5-year restraining order against him. But prior to the stabbing, you know, he was announcing that he got a new album coming out. He's been putting in work. He just released, I don't know if that was an album, but a whole body of work, which was cool. It was good. Obviously, it's not going to be as good as the stuff that he would do in a studio with his producers and stuff. But the music he's a generational talent in my opinion. I know people will say, nah, bro, nah, hell no. But I think he is. I think he's super talented, and it's crazy to see that he's going through that. But definitely my prayers, and just kind of crazy. It'll be interesting to see public videos or photos of him, you know, post this crazy incident. Let me know what y'all think in the chat, man. All right, cool. That was just some culture stuff. I want to get into some growth here. I want to see what people think about. Nah, I don't care about pharmaceuticals that much, so maybe not. Oh no. So, you know, I was looking at. I do like the bill, the executive order. Sorry, that Trump signed over the weekend about pharmaceuticals. So let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at that, because that's definitely going to affect the stock market, and it did. A lot of pharmaceutical companies dropped, 3-6%. All right, let's take a look at this.
Trump said he planned to
There it
slash
is.
U.S. prescription drug costs.
10%.
In a social media post, Trump said that he will sign an executive order today mandating that Americans pay no more than people in countries that have the lowest price.
I'm not
Let's
mad
get
at
more
that.
now with Katya Dmitrieva. Katya, good morning. What more do we know?
Well, we know that this would be a very big policy indeed in the U.S. This is a key promise from President Trump during both election runs, in fact, in 2016, as well as his most recent campaign. And the idea of this, which of course we only know from his Truth Social post, so still a lot of questions, but what we do know so far is this would revive sort of a most favored nation approach to drug pricing. In other words, the U.S. or a U.S. consumer would be paying essentially the same as the lowest price available elsewhere, at least on the face of it. So you think about buying a vial of insulin in Turkey for a couple dollars, it should be the same price for American consumers. Now, a lot of questions as well about how this would apply alongside tariffs. There were pharmaceutical tariffs announced recently that would, of course, potentially cause shortages and drive up prices. Also, how it would be implemented, because Republicans themselves are not very favorable to this. They don't really like the most favored nation approach, as well as pharmaceutical companies as well. As you mentioned there, a lot of pharma stocks reacting very negatively to this news.
Yeah, particularly already in the Asian session, the likes of the Japanese drug maker Chugai Pharmaceutical, Takeda Pharmaceutical as well, losing about 5% earlier on in trading. Katya, just talk us through which other stocks we ought to be watching. Of course, the European Open could feel a bit of this as well.
Yeah, of course. European stocks, pharmaceutical stocks in particular. We had in the Asian session, of course, some powers at play there, because there are some positive developments in the U.S.-China trade talks, which kind of gave a lift. But certainly European stocks, U.S. as well. When things get underway, Trump is supposed to be signing this, he said, Monday morning. So that's in a few hours when the U.S. wakes up. And we'll also be looking for more details, whether this would look like his previous most favored nation approach, whether it would apply to Medicare reimbursements, whether it would be narrow, for example, would only apply to things that were dispensed in doctors' offices or more broadly in hospitals. So still a lot of questions, but certainly we should be watching those pharma stocks when they open.
This is CMS administration.
Yeah, so let's look at some of the key provisions of this executive order. So one of the biggest things is that it's benchmarking drug prices. The MFN policy mandates that Medicare pays no more for prescription drugs than the lowest price available in comparable wealthy nations. That's amazing. Like, we've been getting played here in America just because we can afford it. And we can't afford it. We can't afford it. You know, there's so many people who are getting left behind with these crazy drug prices. When you go to a hospital and you get a bill and it's itemized, for Tylenol, what they're charging is insane. Targeted medication. So the policy is primarily going to focus on Medicare Part B drugs, which are administered by physicians. High-cost medications like Merck's Keytruda and Johnson & Johnson's Darzalex, Faspro could see significant price reductions. Implementation timeline. So the executive order sets a 30-day deadline for drug manufacturers to voluntarily lower prices. If they fail to comply, the Department of Health and Human Services is directed to propose regulations to enforce the pricing changes. Whoa. Talk about people say capitalism doesn't work, but America's definitely it's not just a capitalist society like a lot of people like to paint. It's a mix. It's definitely a mix. The order charges the U.S. Trade Representative and the Commerce Secretary with preventing international market manipulation and directs the Federal Trade Commission to investigate anti-competitive pricing practices. I wonder what people like Martin Shkreli thinks about this. Let me see if I can find something with him. All right, but let me finish reading this. So here's some industry and legal reactions. So pharmaceutical industry concerns. The policy has sparked concern among pharmaceutical companies and investors. Critics argue that government-controlled pricing could harm innovation and patient care. I was against government-controlled pricing. I'm against it on 99% of things. And the 1% of things that I am not against it on is pharmaceuticals, bro. Is life-changing, life-saving medicines. Totally for it. And yeah, I think consumables, things that people just kind of want, and even like with real estate, you don't need a certain a 5-bedroom 3-bathroom house. You don't like there's arguments there where around the world, if you look at the average square footage for the average families, like America does a really good job at that. And so it's one of those things where when it gets painful enough, maybe I'll be for it, on the residential side. But at the same time, you don't have to live in San Francisco. You don't have to. And I know it's an inconvenience and it sucks, right? But my whole life, me and my wife, we moved to certain areas to save money. Like we didn't get to live in downtown Tampa or South Tampa. For those of you guys who are familiar with Tampa, we had to live in Land O'Lakes for a little bit, or Newport Richey for a little bit, or Brandon for a little bit. And then we moved to Wesley Chapel, and now Wesley Chapel is super expensive. But, sometimes you have to sacrifice to be able to make a living until you don't have to anymore. I think it's a little bit different with medicine, with pharmaceuticals. So there's legal challenges that are anticipated, though. Given that a similar attempt was struck down in 2020 for not adhering to congressional rulemaking requirements, the new order is expected to face legal challenges. And there's a lot of money behind this pharmaceutical industry. So that'll be interesting. Additional executive actions in conjunction with the MFN policy, President Trump also signed an executive order aimed at promoting domestic production of essential medicines. This order seeks to eliminate regulatory barriers to domestic manufacturing of critical pharmaceutical products, thereby reducing U.S. dependence on foreign manufacturing. I love that because we saw what happened during the pandemic. The U.S. was not looking good for us, and what China was doing to the U.S. and how they threatened the U.S. When they were looking into Wuhan. The U.S. learned this lesson. We have to diversify where we're getting our medicines, our essential medicines. And so these executive actions represent a significant shift in U.S. drug pricing policy and pharmaceutical manufacturing strategy with the potential to impact drug costs. I wonder what CNN thinks about this. CNN, they're very critical on Trump. So I want to hear what they have to say about this. But I also want to see, what... I don't want to say leaders in the industry because I think Martin Shkreli is pretty much banned, but I could be wrong about that. Yeah, I'm probably wrong about that. Let's see what I can find here. All right, we got something here. Let's see what CNN what they have to say.
Situation, meaning equalization. There's a term, it's called equalization. Nobody wants to mention that term. And I'm not knocking the drug companies. I'm really more knocking the countries than the drug companies because they're forced to do things. But the drug lobby is the strongest lobby in this country, they say, the drug lobby. It's between that and lawyers. And they have a lot of power. But starting today, the United States will no longer subsidize the health care of foreign countries, which is what we were doing. We're subsidizing others' health care. Countries where they paid a small fraction of what, for the same drug, that what we pay.
That's crazy.
Many, many times more for. And we'll no longer tolerate profiteering and price gouging from Big Pharma. But again, it was really the countries that forced Big Pharma to do things that, frankly, I'm not sure they really felt comfortable doing. But they've gotten away with it, these countries. European Union has been brutal, brutal. And the drug companies actually told me stories. It was just brutal how they forced them. And European Union suing all our companies, Apple, Google, Meta. They're suing all of our companies. They end up, they have judges that are European Union-centric, and they get rewarded $15 billion, $17 billion, $20 billion, and they use that to run their operation. Not going to happen any longer, that I can tell you. So what's been happening is we've been subsidizing other countries throughout the world, not just in Europe, throughout the world. European Union was the most difficult from what I understand. I mean, I'll tell you a story. A friend of mine who's a businessman, very, very, very top guy. Most of you would have heard of him. A highly neurotic, brilliant businessman, seriously overweight, and he takes the fat shot drug. And he called me up, and he said, President, he calls me, he used to call me Donald, now he calls me President, so that's nice respect. But he's a rough guy, smart guy, very successful, very rich. I wouldn't even know how we would know this, but because he's got comments. President, could I ask you a question? What? I'm in London, and I just paid for this damn fat drug I take. I said, it's not working. He said, I just paid $88. And in New York, I pay $1,300. What the hell is going on? He said, so I checked. And it's the same box, made in the same plant, by the same company. It's the identical pill that I buy in New York. And here I'm paying $88 in London. In New York, I'm paying $1,300. Now, this is a great businessman, but he's not familiar with this crazy situation that we have. But he was stunned. But it was just one of those stories. And I brought it up with the drug companies, represented by somebody who's very, very smart, good person, too. And we argued about it for about half hour. And then finally he just said, because they can't justify it, he just said, look, you got me. You got me. I can no longer they've been justifying this crap for years. They said, oh, it's research and development. Well, I said, well, research and development, other countries should pay research and development too. It's for their benefit. It was just one of those things. And the other countries would set a price, and they'd meet the price, and they'd say, if you don't meet the price, you can't sell it in our country. I said, well, then you walk away, and they'll call you back, and they'll sell it in the country. But now they'll have to do that. So for the first time in many years, we'll slash the cost of prescription drugs, and we will bring fairness to America. Drug prices will come down by much more, really, if you think 59. If you think of a drug that is sometimes 10 times more expensive, it's much more than the 59%. It depends on the way you want to analyze it, but in one way you could analyze it that way. But between 59 and 80, and I guess even 90%. So when I worked so hard in the first term, and if I got prices down, remember I was the only one to ever get prices down for a full year, but I'd get them down like 2%, and I thought it was like a big deal. Well, we're getting them down 60, 70, 80, 90%, but actually more than that if you think about it in the way mathematically. And Farmer has to say, we're sorry, but we'll not be able to do this any longer to these countries that have been so tough. They've been very tough, nasty.
This is an extraordinary day. This is an issue that, I've worked with the Democratic Party, and every major Democratic leader for 20 years has been making this promise to the American people. This was the fulcrum of Bernie Sanders' runs for presidency, that he was going to eliminate this discrepancy between Europe and the United States. But as it turns out, none of them were doing it. It's one of these promises that politicians make to their constituents, knowing that they'll never have to do it. And the reason they'll never have to do it is because they know that Congress is controlled in so many ways by the pharmaceutical industry. There's at least one pharmaceutical lobbyist for every congressman, every senator on Capitol Hill, and every member of the Supreme Court. By some estimates, 3. Pharmaceutical companies, the industry itself spends 3 times what the next largest lobbyist spends on lobbying. So this was an issue
crazy.
that people talked about, but nobody wanted to do anything because it
Too
was
much money.
radioactive. They knew you couldn't get it by Congress. We now have a president who is...
You couldn't get it past Congress because of all the lobbying money from the pharmacy companies. You know, all of these, and I want to know who got the most lobbying dollars from pharmaceuticals. Let's look that up.
A man of his word who has the courage. President Trump was taking money from the pharmaceutical industry too. I think they gave you $100 million.
Yeah.
But he can't be bought, unlike most of the politicians in this country. And he is standing here for the American people. I don't know what, there's writers like Lord Elizabeth Warren or Robert Reich who are saying that President Trump is on this side of the oligarchs. There has never been a president more willing to stand up to the oligarchs than President Donald Trump. And I'm very, very proud of you, Mr. President, for your courage, I'll say, because I don't want to be crude, your intestinal fortitude, your stiff spine, and your willingness to...
Yeah, so check this out, guys. So it's pretty much both parties. I just want to look at real quick. Our own drug companies are the worst. Wasn't this already done in the last administration? Oh yeah, Trump overturned this. I don't know. But who gives a damn? Who cares? Maybe he didn't like the bill and now we're getting a better version of it. Because I don't remember medicine getting cheaper, maybe just insulin, but what about everything else, right? But then see what I'm saying? It's just so divisive. People only care about whose team is doing what. Anyways, this is what I'm seeing. So it looks like the top individual recipients was Kathy Rogers, who's a Republican. What did I say? Recipients, my bad. Was Kathy Rogers, who's a Republican out of, I think, Washington. Bob Menendez, who's a Democrat out of New Jersey. Kristen Sinema out of Arizona, who's independent. Brett Guthrie, who's a Republican out of Kentucky. And Richard Burr, who's a Republican out of North Carolina. He's retired, but he was definitely big in North Carolina. And so the pharma splits money roughly 55% to Republicans, 45% to Democrats in recent cycles. They often hedge bets by donating to both parties to maintain access, regardless of who's in power. So it's just based on who they think is going to win, it sounds like. But just in case, you got to hedge your bets. They don't care who's in office. They just want to pour money in. And so it's all of our politicians who, like RFK was saying there, it was radioactive to even touch, those drug prices. And so all the major spenders, I mean, you look at it, Pharma, Pfizer, Merck, Johnson & Johnson, AbbVie, Amgen. Yeah, it's incredible. So it goes to kind of show you, like Trump's willing to just do what's right here. He's not going to get any credit for it, but I like that RFK and Trump push for these lower prescription drug prices. Did Biden have let's compare them. We don't have the full details of this one, but let's see. Because Biden's might have been better. All right, so I'm using full transparency. I'm using ChatGPT here. And I want you guys to know, like, the way that I do this to try to just seek truth is I try to look at, people are like, you got to be careful who you're getting your information from. What are you going to do? Just AP News? Even AP News has some biases, especially on their fact checking, right? So what I like to do is I'll look at Fox. We know who their biases are. I look at CNN. We know their biases. MSNBC. We know their biases. I'll look at other, people speaking. If Trump is speaking about himself, obviously he has a bias. If it's freaking Elizabeth Warren, obviously she has her biases. And then I'll fact check the things that they're saying through ChatGPT or search, and I'll look for sources. And then what ends up happening, guys, is you guys help me out because I read your comments. And a lot of your comments change my mind on some things, or it makes me look at things that I didn't notice. Or if I'm live and the chat is talking, I'm paying attention to the chat and we're figuring out, what they're letting me know certain things that they might have known, because some of you guys are way more informed on certain topics than I am. Like when I was covering the Palestine, the Gaza and Israel conflict, man, you guys helped out. And I got an update on that, by the way, because of the comment section. So you'll get an idea of, I think holistically with that approach, even though my opinions might change, they might evolve, it's because I'm looking at this holistically. I know everybody has their biases, and I'm completely transparent. I'm a Christian. I tend to be center right. I tend to be more conservative on things. On social issues, I do have a lot of left-leaning opinions, but I think anyone who's too far gone right or too far gone left, you're just too extreme, and that never sees progress. So nonetheless, let's take a look at this through ChatGPT. Let me zoom in a bit before I put the screen. Here we go. So let's look at the Trump versus Biden pharma policy, because I see the comments on the CNN thing, and they're really dogging. Didn't we already have this? And we are. All right, let's take a look. So the main focus for Trump's executive order. Oh, this is 2020. Damn. Let me redo this. I don't know if this will work, just because the details aren't really done, I don't think, or maybe I'm wrong here. I think the details are. He already signed the executive order. Let's see. All right, take a look at it. So price negotiation. Biden implemented Medicare's ability to negotiate drug prices through the IRA, with negotiated prices to begin in 2026. Trump reinstated the most favored nation price model via executive order, aiming to match U.S. drugs with the lowest prices globally. I'm taking Trump for the W on that one. Biden focused on targeted pharmaceutical companies directly through legislation to lower prices. Got it. Trump is focusing on reducing the influence of PBMs and promoting direct-to-consumer sales. Okay. This one is a little bit more of a freer, more of a capitalist type of direction. But if you really want the results, obviously going directly through legislation to lower prices helps. But that's more of a socialist program, right? So it just depends. If you want the results, Biden might have got the W here, but I'm leaning more towards Trump because I have more of a capitalist, opinion. So Biden, he passed legislation through Congress, providing a more robust and enforceable framework. Trump utilized executive orders, which may face legal challenges and require further regulatory action for enforcement. So Biden gets the W there. And we know that this is going to be an issue. We'll see how it goes, but we know it's going to be an issue. Even though this is a little bit more lenient to capitalism, it might not have as much of an issue as we're fearing, right? Biden, structured legislative approach with defined timelines and enforcement mechanisms. Broad executive action with potential for immediate impact but uncertain enforceability. So Biden gets the W there too. Both administrations have aimed to reduce drug prices but have taken different paths. Trump's approach is more immediate and confrontational, focusing on executive action and targeting intermediaries, while Biden's strategy is legislative, aiming for systematic change through established governmental processes. So I like Trump's approach a lot better. I think it's more in line with what our country's values are and our capitalist society. Biden's is definitely more of a socialist approach, in my opinion. And so I like Trump's approach better. And I think Trump could get it done. I don't think Biden could have got it done the same way that Trump is getting it done, because being confrontational, negotiating, that's just not Biden's strong suit. And people will say what they want about Trump and his negotiating. I'm taking Trump's negotiating over Biden's all day. Cool. So that gives me a lot more clarity on the executive order for pharmaceuticals. And yeah, I'm interested to see how this develops, how pharmaceutical companies fight back. But I know they're definitely not going to like it. Interesting times, guys. Interesting times. All right. We briefly talked about how you guys helped me with my channel. And like I said, people will say be careful on where you're getting your information. I just want to give you guys some examples of how I approach this in a holistic way to get the best information that I can, to learn as much as I can. There's always going to be biases, especially with the news, especially with what people are teaching you. Like even when I'm learning stocks, right? When I'm learning investing, when I'm investing in businesses, the person you're negotiating with that's selling you their business or that's selling you their property, they're going to have a biased view and they're going to sell at the end of the day because they want you to buy. And so you have to take whatever information you're getting from them and you have to filter it. You have to look at it, analyze it, and then you have to look at opposing views, or maybe look at things from a different perspective to see if you can challenge whatever that information you're getting is. And so the way that you do it a lot of times is you look at biased platforms. You look at CNN, you look at Fox, and then you try to look at AP News, but even AP News has some biases. And then you fact check the claims or the things that you're hearing there. And then because this is live stream, I get to look at the chat and see what their opinions are on the matter. And then I can go look at the comment sections of videos that I've already published and see what their opinions are. And my opinions are going to constantly evolve. Everyone's should. If your opinion is the same 30 years ago as it is now, that's a bit weird. And that's why even with politicians, I give them grace. Like when you see, old clips of politicians or celebrities pop up, I don't think that's fair. So with that being said, man, check out this comment. I'm only 3 minutes in, but I just want to point out that the Philistines were Greek. Basically, they're not connected in any way to the Palestinians, and the Palestinians are Arabs from all over the Middle East. And so I'm showing you that because we watched this documentary right here that said the Philistines are today's Palestinians. And they're saying, and there was a part in this video that raised a red flag for me when it said the Philistines, and that's pretty much how the Palestinian name came to be. They got it from the Philistines. I'm like, is there any actual proof of that? I couldn't find any proof of it. But nonetheless, I would say that my chat was primarily pro-Palestine. And so we kind of just went with that definition. And I was pretty much saying that the Philistines were the Palestinians. And so you had the Jews who were the Israelites. You had the Palestinians who were the Philistines. And the Israelites and the Philistines were both shared that land. And eventually they turned into the Palestinians and the Jews. And they both shared that land. And so I understand the conflict, but I also understand why compromise needs to be made. It's just, how does that compromise get done now when so much has gone on historically with these two ethnicities? And so it's so complex in my opinion. Although there will be people will say there's nothing complex at all. But anyways, let's keep reading this comment. So I said, do you have a source I can look up? Much of the information I've read says that they were Arab people from that land. And so he said, originally they can come from the Arabian Peninsula, later spread all over the region. In the last 200 years, both Jews and Arabs lived in that area, if that's your confusion. Like, I knew that, but I assumed that the Arabs there were the original Philistines who became the Palestinians, who are also Arab, right? And the Jews were the Israelites that eventually became the Jews. And so I said, there were thousands of years ago with the Jews. I'm asking for a source that says Philistines were not today's Palestinians. All the info I found says that. Because I didn't just watch this video and come to the conclusion that Palestinians were Philistines, I Googled it and I found, matching sources. Although the sources probably weren't the best, I did find matching sources. And so, chat and myself, we just kind of kept going with it because other videos that we watched kind of said the same thing. Most scholars agree that Philistines were Greek origin, and he started referencing, and I was like, oh, okay, this guy kind of, all right, maybe he does know. And I said, I spent hours researching this because I spent 4 hours researching this. So then I started doing some more research on my own, and I did find, even with ChatGPT, the following. Ancient Canaanites were in the land first. Long before Jews or Israelites or Palestinians existed as we know them today, the land was inhabited by Canaanites and other Semitic peoples. Modern Palestinians often claim descent from these ancient peoples, and so do many Jews. DNA studies show overlap in ancestry among groups from the Levant. So when people say Palestinians were there first, they often mean they descend from pre-Israelite peoples like the Canaanites. But here's the catch. Jewish history in the land is extremely old too, tracing back to Abraham, 1800 BC, and the Kingdom of Israel, 1000 BC. It's not a matter of one group suddenly arriving out of nowhere. Palestinians have lived there for centuries. Even though the term Palestinian as a national identity emerged in the 20th century, Arab Muslim communities have lived in the land continuously since the 7th century CE. So many Palestinians feel justified in saying, we lived here for 1,300 years. We were here before Zionism, which is true. But Zionism isn't the same thing as Jews. And I later, shout out to the comments section because you guys point that out as well. And so this is partially true, but it doesn't erase the fact that Jews lived in the land before the Arab conquest and maintain a continuous, though often small, presence even during long periods of exile. And so the confusion between ethnicity and geography is important too. And I've noticed that in the comments and in the chat that there's a confusion between those two. A lot of times we kind of conflate the two terms. So the name Palestine was used by the Romans, then by various empires, the Byzantine, the Arab caliphates, Ottoman, as a geographic label, not an ethnic one. People conflate being a Palestinian today with being the original inhabitant of ancient Palestine. But that ignores how much the population and ruling powers change over millennia. And then there's also political messaging, right? There's a political bias. And so in modern geopolitics, both Palestinians and Israelis use history to support their claims to the land. Palestinians emphasize continuous Arab presence since the 600 CE and claim ancient roots. Israelis emphasize indigenous Jewish presence from biblical times and their return to ancestral lands. Statements like Palestinians were here before the Jews are often meant to delegitimize Jewish claims to in I don't even want to try to pronounce the word, in the land. Pretty much existence in the land during that time. Just as some statements on the other side deny any Palestinian identity or history. It's happening from both sides, but the facts are both sides were there. So lack of clear education is also an issue. Many people don't understand the complexity of Middle Eastern history. I say all the time how complex this conflict is, and people are like, it's not complex. It's not. Everybody just wants to think in binary terms, and that's politics in general. One group must be the original people and the other must be the outsider. That's how people see it. But in truth, both peoples have legitimate historic ties to the land, just at different times and in different ways. And so that's why during the chat, when I was live streaming my research, people said, what if it was your land and your house? Would you give up a piece of your land? I said, depends. We would have to talk about it, but there would definitely have to be compromise if somebody came over. It's not like I'm just going to give the land if I'm already here, but I would give up some, but it wouldn't be for free. We'd have to work something out, right? And that's all people are saying, I think. And the problem is we can't come to terms with that. Even though, I see from an outside perspective how both have legitimate historic ties to that land. And so the balanced truth, in my opinion, is that Jews have ancestral ties to the land dating back to over 3,000 years. Palestinians have lived in that land for thousands of years as distinct Arab population, and neither side is foreign to the land. The debate isn't about who existed first. It's about competing national claims shaped by colonization, exile, and conflict. And it happened over thousands of years on and off. And so now we're in a place where, outside perspective stepped in, like the British Army or the British government, Europe, the United States government now, and we're trying to figure out common ground and how to make both sides coexist. But there's extreme parties on both sides. Some would say there's extreme Zionists, and there's obviously extreme sides like Hamas and the Houthis and all these other terrorist groups. And I'm not doing that claiming that they're not terrorist groups. I'm just saying that some people would say that they're not. Some people would. I think they are terrorist groups because of the extreme things that they've done for their views. And so you have extremism on both sides, and both of these sides are what's currently representing the Jews and the Palestinians, and that's not good. It hasn't been good, obviously. You're seeing crazy war crimes from both sides, and I don't know how this ever gets resolved. Even our world leaders haven't been able to figure it out. But all I know is it's a never-ending cycle. I know 25,000 children are orphans now. I know 15,000 children were killed in Palestine. I know innocent people in the thousands were killed on the Israeli side. And people will say it's not the same. It's not like Ukraine and Russia, but it kind of is. There are casualties. There are innocent people, especially in the beginning of the wars, that were being killed in the tens of thousands on the Ukraine side, especially. And I'm not trying to compare the two as one is worse. They're both horrible, and people just want to see peace, I think. But I wanted to point that out. That shout out to the comment section for helping me figure this out. There was one more comment that came from an Israeli, because there wasn't any Israeli that was in my live stream in the chat. It was mostly Palestinians. But I also feel like, this man's voice should be heard too. So is this it? No, this is not it. Let me find the comment first. For some reason, I can't find the comment now. This is one, but this isn't the main comment I'm looking for. Chris, bottom line is coming to Palestine, modern day Israel. After the Germans did the horrible things they'd done and claiming that the land is wrong and you don't need anything about logic and conscience, nobody denies there was Jews living in the area. Of course there was Jews living in the area. The difference is they weren't Zionist Jews. Jews lived in the area harmoniously amongst Christians and Muslims. Matter of fact, I don't know how to read. So Jews even believe it is forbidden to have a state until the arrival of the Messiah. To say it's lawful for Israel to occupy Palestine because it's their birthright due to history is the same thing as saying it's Muslim Arabs' birthright to occupy Spain because of the Muslims living in modern day Spain. I don't think it's the same thing. I don't think it's the same thing. So, yeah, no, I don't think it's the same thing. And no offense to you, I need to look a little bit deeper into this, but isn't Islam like a fairly new religion? Compared to how long Spain and all that has been around. Obviously, I'm ignorant to that. I don't see it as being the same thing. I see the conflict here. I see the longing for Jews to have their own state, for being there. I see that Palestine was created in the 20th century. So, it's one of those things where, okay, if Palestine is created, can we have Israel too? Because we were in that land as well. So, again, I think it's much more complex than this, Miguel. Let me see if I can find the other comment that I thought was worth reading. All right, I can't find that comment, so I'm gonna have to move on. But alrighty. Hey, what's up, Ismail? I'm just seeing this message. They say AP News is the most trustworthy, but I would say just look at everyone and then fact check stuff if you can. You know what I mean? So with that being said, guys, that's it for today. I'm done with my live. I go live daily. I will see y'all tomorrow. Please spread the word, man. I used to get like 30 people on my live streams because I was doing it on my main channel. But because of the YouTube algorithm, I have to live stream on a separate channel, and then we'll upload the clips on the main channel. So yeah, man, thanks for hanging out with me today, guys. I will see y'all tomorrow.